Welcome to the launch of Sri Ashok Tandon's book, The Reverse Swing Colonialism to Cooperation. This book is this has been published by Prabhat Prakashan, and to formally inaugurate this program, I would request our distinguished guest, Honorable Union Minister Sh Hardeep Singh Puri ji, Sri Ashok Tandon and Sri Prabhat Kumar, वो माँ सरस्वती की प्रतिमा पे माल्यार्पण के साथ इस कार्यक्रम की एक औपचारिक शुरुआत करें। अब मैं श्री प्रभात कुमार जी से आग्रह करूंगा कि कृपया पुस्तक भेंट करके हमारे आदरणीय गेस्ट श्री हरदीप सिंह पुरी जी का स्वागत करें।
चलिए, थैंक यू।
कार्यक्रम के आगे की कार्रवाई और मंच संचालन के लिए मैं अब प्रभात प्रकाशन की तरफ से श्री आदरणीय प्रभात कुमार जी को मंच आग्रह करूंगा कि वो मंच संचालन की कार्रवाई आगे बढ़ाएं।
धन्यवाद सौरभ जी। प्रभात प्रकाशन द्वारा आयोजित इस समारोह में आप सबका हार्दिक स्वागत है। हमारा सौभाग्य है कि आज केंद्रीय पेट्रोलियम मंत्री माननीय श्री हरदीप सिंह पुरी जी के करकमलों से अशोक टंडन जी की पुस्तक द रिवर्स स्विंग का लोकार्पण यहाँ संपन्न होगा। आप सब बुद्धिजीवी, लेखक, पत्रकार, समाजधर्मी यहाँ उपस्थित हैं। मैं हृदय से आप सबका स्वागत करता हूँ। प्रभात प्रकाशन का सदैव यह प्रयास रहता है कि वो ऐसी पुस्तकें प्रकाशित करे जो समाज में सकारात्मकता पैदा करे, एक आशावाद जागृत करे, हमारे अवसाद को कम करे, भारत के गौरवशाली अतीत को रेखांकित करे और स्वर्णिम भविष्य की ओर अग्रसर करे। आज लोकार्पित होने वाली पुस्तक उसी परंपरा की एक कड़ी है, क्योंकि यह पुस्तक भारतवर्ष के पुनरुत्थान और पुनर्जागरण की गौरव गाथा है। यह नए भारत की वह यशोगाथा कहती है जो विदेशी शासकों और आक्रांताओं की काली छाया से उबरकर सफलता के शिखर पर पहुंचने की यात्रा है। भारत ज्ञान, संपदा, स्थापत्य कला, उद्योग, संसाधन सभी दृष्टि से संपन्न था, इसीलिए इसे सोने की चिड़िया भी कहा गया। इसी ऐश्वर्य के आकर्षण में यहाँ के संसाधनों को लूटने के लिए विदेशी आते रहे। उन्होंने हमारे भौतिक संसाधन तो लूटे ही, हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था, सामाजिक ताने बाने और सांस्कृतिक धरोहर को भी नष्ट भ्रष्ट किया। पर हम भारतीयों की अद्भुत जिजीविषा और संकल्प शक्ति का प्रमाण है कि हम सदैव उठ खड़े हुए। आज लोकार्पित होने वाली पुस्तक उसी उद्घोष को हमारे सामने प्रस्तुत करती है। भारत के यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री माननीय श्री नरेंद्र मोदी के नेतृत्व में भारतवर्ष ने जो उत्कर्ष किया है, उसका जो रूपांतरण हुआ है वह रिवर्स स्विंग ही है। पहले भारत को हेय दृष्टि से देखा जाता था, पर अब भारत के नए शिल्पकार मोदी जी ने भारतवर्ष को विश्व पटल पर अप्रतिम ऊर्जा से संपृक्त किया है। इस पुस्तक में आपको इसी प्रकार के उदाहरण मिलेंगे कि कैसे भारत ने अपने मलिन दिनों से ऊपर उठकर एक वैभवशाली और उन्नत भारत की ओर अग्रसर होने का संकल्प लिया है। हम विश्व की 5वीं सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था बन गए हैं। भारत विश्व का नेतृत्व करने की भूमिका में है। हाल ही में संपन्न हुए G20 ने इसको भली भांति रेखांकित किया है। इस पुस्तक के लेखक श्री अशोक टंडन वरिष्ठ पत्रकार, स्तंभकार और राजनीतिक टिप्पणीकार हैं, जिनके पास पत्रकारिता, मीडिया और मीडिया शिक्षा का 50 वर्षों से अधिक का अनुभव है। 7 साल से अधिक समय तक वे लंदन में पीटीआई के ब्यूरो प्रमुख और बाद में नई दिल्ली में पीटीआई के राजनयिक संपादक सहित विभिन्न पदों पर कार्यरत रहे। वे प्रधानमंत्री माननीय अटल जी के पीएमओ में यूएस ओएसडी मीडिया थे। बाद में माखनलाल चतुर्वेदी राष्ट्रीय पत्रकारिता एवं संचार विश्वविद्यालय में नोएडा परिसर के निदेशक रहे। भारतीय प्रेस परिषद के आप सदस्य रहे और प्रेस पंजीकरण अपीलीय बोर्ड के सदस्य भी। लंदन में अपनी पोस्टिंग के दौरान वे 2 बार इंडियन जर्नलिस्ट एसोसिएशन यूरोप IJA के अध्यक्ष रहे। जनवरी 2023 में उन्हें SGT यूनिवर्सिटी ने डीलिट की मानद उपाधि से अलंकृत किया। वर्तमान में वे प्रसार भारती बोर्ड के सदस्य हैं। अपने गहन अध्ययन और अनुभव के आधार पर उन्होंने इस पुस्तक का लेखन किया है। मैं सबसे पहले माननीय हरदीप सिंह पुरी जी से आग्रह करता हूं कि वे इस पुस्तक का लोकार्पण कर अनुग्रहित करें। द रिवर्स स्विंग का लोकार्पण।
अरे भैया चलिए, इसको भैया ले जाना होगा। ये भी है रिबन भी।
हमारा सौभाग्य है कि अपनी इस व्यस्त दिनचर्या में से समय निकालकर माननीय हरदीप पुरी जी हमारे मध्य में आए और इस पुस्तक का लोकार्पण किया। हम आपके आभारी हैं। माननीय हरदीप पुरी जी भारतीय विदेश सेवा के उच्चाधिकारी रहे। उनका 4 दशक का इलस्ट्रियस करियर रहा है। उन्होंने लंदन, ब्रासीलिया में एम्बेसडोरियल पोस्ट पर वे रहे। जिनेवा और न्यूयॉर्क में संयुक्त राष्ट्र में भारत के स्थायी प्रतिनिधि के रूप में भी उन्होंने कार्य किया। वह संयुक्त राष्ट्र सुरक्षा परिषद की अध्यक्षता करने वाले कुछ भारतीयों में से एक हैं और इसकी आतंकवादी रोधी समिति की अध्यक्षता करने वाले एकमात्र व्यक्ति हैं। वे RIS के अध्यक्ष और अनेक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संस्थानों के उच्च पदों पर पदस्थ रहे। हाल ही में संपन्न हुए G20 के सफल आयोजन में उनकी अहम भूमिका थी। उन्होंने अनेक पुस्तकें लिखी हैं। इसमें से एक पुस्तक जो कि मेरे हस्तक्षेप का प्रकाशन प्रभात प्रकाशन ने किया है। मैं बहुत आदर के साथ आदरणीय हरदीप पुरी जी को आमंत्रित करता हूं, कृपया आएँ, हमें संबोधित करें। माननीय हरदीप पुरी जी।
प्रभात कुमार जी, अशोक जी, and I have so many friends here this afternoon that if I were to start naming each one of you, the time allotted to me would be over. But I think as I look around the room, I can say with a degree of confidence that except a few people present here today, I have perhaps known Ashok ji the longest. अब थैंक यू। अरे हमारी शक्ल नहीं बदलने वाली यार, इतनी देर बैठो है, बैठा आराम से। अब ये many of you knew him as the PTI's resident correspondent in London. Others have worked with him in the Vajpayee PMO. He is now known as a distinguished member of Prasar Bharati, as in his political role. But I think Bhagwan Singh ji and I have known him when we were in the university, और मुझे लगता है कि राजकुमार भाटिया जी भी, आप भी इनको कितने सालों से जानते हैं? 67 years? और नहीं हो सकता। 67 नहीं, रायन 67 का नहीं है अभी, वो कितने सालों से 1967 से। हाँ वो सही है, वो सही। आप भी हाँ सही। देखिए मुझे याद है कि उस समय दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय में इनडायरेक्ट सिस्टम ऑफ इलेक्शन होता था। इनडायरेक्ट सिस्टम ऑफ इलेक्शन का मतलब यह था कि हर एक कॉलेज के पास 10 सुप्रीम काउंसलर की वोट होती थी। और बिफोर वी कन्वर्टेड टू अ सिस्टम ऑफ डायरेक्ट इलेक्शंस, दैट सिस्टम ऑफ एन इलेक्टोरल कॉलेज कंप्राइजिंग elected supreme councillors and the college prime minister or president was one of the most, I don't know, Pankaj, how should I describe it? Should I compare it with current practices somewhere or whatever? It was a highly colorful system. So what used to happen is that supreme councillors used to be taken on a jaunt. Now, Pankaj can't stop laughing. I won't go to the full details. I'll just describe the periphery. So, one of us means हमारे साथी थे वो, मैंने तो सिविल सर्विस का इम्तिहान दिया, मैं वहाँ चला गया, पर वो कॉलेज के प्रिंसिपल बन गए। आप पता मैं किसकी बात कर रहा हूँ। तो मेरे पास आए चुनाव से पहले, ही सेड कि भाई वोट किसको करना है। मैंने कहा कोई शक है इसके बारे में? नहीं यार शक तो नहीं है, वी आर क्लियर इन आवर माइंड्स। मैंने कहा डाउट क्यों हो रहा है? वी नो हुम वी हैव टू वोट फॉर। पर ये पोलिंग बूथ के अंदर बैठे थे, याद है आपको? दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी स्टूडेंट्स यूनियन का इलेक्शन था, तो कुछ ऐसी हवा फैल रही थी वहां पे कि देयर वाज गोइंग टू बी क्रॉस वोटिंग एटसेट्रा। सो मेनी ऑफ अस एक्चुअली व्हेन वी वोटेड वी showed the vote. There were no iPhones, so you couldn't record, so I don't think anybody else was caring. So I remember Ashok ji, then he was the विद्यार्थी परिषद के ये कोऑर्डिनेटर थे। इनके साथ एक और बड़े महान व्यक्ति थे, सुरेश कौशिक, याद है आपको? याद है, ओके। तो इन दोनों को मैंने देखा ना, मैंने तो आप बोले क्यों दिखा रहे? मैंने कहा कुछ ऐसी हवा फैल रही है यहाँ पे दैट देयर इज एन एलिमेंट ऑफ सिनिसिज्म और डाउट कि यहाँ कुछ क्रॉस वोटिंग होने वाली है। एनीवे, आवर फ्रेंड वन हैंडसमली एंड द रेस्ट इज हिस्ट्री। Ashok ji has chosen to write on a subject on which expertise comes quite easily, but he has chosen some very interesting aspects of that important bilateral relationship. There's a chapter there on how we overtook the United Kingdom to become the 5th largest economy. I think most of us relish that. When we become the 3rd largest economy, when we overtake Japan and Germany, I don't think we'll enjoy it as much. But because we overtook the UK to become the 5th largest economy, there was an element of whatever. Now, many of the stories or the chapters in here, and I think there are about 24, they are, I think, drawn from the author's stay in London. Many of them, but they have been updated because some of the events are more recent. But I would just, in order to try to entertain you, pick on 2 or 3. The first chapter is on Mahatma Gandhi, an apostle of peace for Britons. Now, we are all disciples of the father of the nation, his role in building India, for creating that link between an elitist national movement and the masses, fusing that is very well documented. But let me tell you, the Mahatma himself was quite a complicated being. I remember the South African High Commissioner, rather the South African Permanent Representative in New York telling me with some degree of delight, listen, he told me, we were very close friends. You sent us an English educated barrister and we converted him into the Mahatma. He was not entirely wrong, because Mahatma Gandhi's initial life in the UK, his education, University College London, then being called to the bar at the Inner Temple, prepared him for an English style barrister. It is when he goes to South Africa that the Gandhi that we know and the Gandhi who contributed to our national movement, that begins to mature. So whilst in the UK, he actually asked for a mobilization of India's help for the war effort in the First World War. That's well documented. But he progresses. And one lighter aside, which is not in the book, I think, although I tried to read it very quickly, but I didn't have the full time. He went to see the then Prime Minister. So somebody asked him, Mr. Gandhi, aren't you a bit underdressed for the occasion? He said, no problem. My host had enough clothes on for both of us. Mahatma Gandhi's contribution, and I'm mentioning that only because I think what is also true, and this is what brings out some of the flavor of that relationship, many of those personalities who contributed to making India what it is, to the freedom struggle, they were all incubated there. And I think that comes out in a chapter. Some of the others who are not there also, Shyamji, Krishanji Verma, he stayed there. His ashes were immersed in a crematorium in Geneva, where I had the privilege of serving, and we got the ashes back when Modi ji came there. This chapter, Indian icons honored in UK with blue plaques, I refer to that. There are several other chapters which refer to giving flavor to the India-UK bilateral relationship. The FTA, which is on the anvil, it reminds me of a country I served in, and I'm saying this in a lighter way. He said, that country, I won't name it, I may be misunderstood, has a great future. And then somebody goes on to say, and will always continue to have one, which means it will never reach that point of greatness, and therefore all that. So I hope the India-UK FTA actually sees the light of day. As somebody who's been schooled in trade policy, I think you need to trade more. And I say that with a degree of seriousness, because even as we draw great strength and like to talk about India being a $4 trillion economy by the end of 2023, the fact of the matter is that 50%, half of our GDP, comes from the external sector. That is the value of goods and services exported, imported, and the value of remittances. So trade is important. Indo-British cooperation in the aviation sector, India-UK telecommunication. All these, I believe, are relevant in understanding what the dynamics of the current bilateral relationship is. But there is something in there, and I don't talk about the political facts that you have a Prime Minister of Indian origin. I'm not going to talk about the fact that XYZ have made a name for themselves. I think what is important is that I don't like the word diaspora, but the Indian origin community, many of them, because of the severe inheritance laws, decided to move residents from UK to Dubai. I don't know what's going to happen, whether they'll move back, but that depends on how things flow. I think they have given shape and content to that relationship far more than what a the diaspora or an Indian origin community can do elsewhere. And I think that comes out in in these chapters very meaningfully. Today, some of the better known and successful brands of automobiles, including the ones which have traditionally been associated, and Ashok ji describes how many Rolls-Royce cars one Nizam had, how many the other had, how somebody who went there wearing casual clothes felt slightly slighted. So he said, I'm going to buy all the Rolls-Royce in the showroom, but the guy who was rude to me should go take them and deliver them in India. So this is the kind of flavor which comes through. But what is true is names such as Rolls-Royce, Jaguar, etc., the fact that Indian entrepreneurship takes it over. And what I'm seeing evolving in the current processes is that this is just a very small indication of what more is likely to happen in that relationship. So I want to compliment the author. I want to recall our common beginnings, if I may do that. Going back to the university, to the fact that this book launch can bring together, people who have associations of, how would you put it, 55, 60 years, 50, 55 years at the very least. And I think that is also a tribute to Shri Ashok Tandon as a human being. I have, there were times when we were very actively in touch. There have been times when we now only have green tea, once in 3 months. But you can always count on him for wise counsel, for mature assessments. And I think there are very few people amongst my generation who have the insights into how we function as a people, as a democratic polity. So I'm very happy that we are all here today. I'm grateful to him for having invited me, and I think the reason he did so is because I have, amongst all of us here, known him perhaps amongst the long. But राजकुमार भाटिया जी को आप पहले से जानते हैं मेरे से कि पहले बाद में, उसी जमाने में? पहले से, चलो वो तो ही नाउ वो अपनी वो हाँ वो संगायु बता रहे हो मुझे. चलिए, thank you very much and thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing. Thank you.
हार्दिक आभार माननीय हरदीप जी भाई साहब. यह कार्यक्रम 2 भागों में हमने रखा है. पहला कार्यक्रम था पुस्तक के लोकार्पण का. आज पुस्तक की एक प्रति आपको मानार्थ उपलब्ध होगी. कृपया प्रति अभी आपको वितरित करेंगे, आप लेके जाएं. और कार्यक्रम के दूसरे चरण में इस पुस्तक पर एक विमर्श है आदरणीय इंद्राणी बागची जी और एम्बेसडर राजीव डोगरा जी के साथ में अशोक टंडन जी का संवाद होगा. मैं आग्रह करता हूं माननीय हरदीप जी भाई साहब से, कृपया आप वहां स्थान लें और यहाँ व्यवस्था कीजिए. ये नीचे ले जाइए. अभी रुकिए, आइए भाई साहब प्लीज.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely delighted to have the presence of such a large number of reputed and enlightened guests on this occasion. And I am honored and hugely thankful to Honorable Minister for Petroleum, Natural Gas, Housing and Urban Development, Sh Hardeep Singh Puri ji, for taking time off his hectic schedule and come here and release my book. Generally speaking, on such occasions, the author is expected to speak about the book. But I have decided, in fact, volunteered myself to be one of the panelists and to talk about the book in a very interactive manner. But before we start the panel discussion, let me, thank and in fact express my sincere gratitude to the publishers, Prabhat Prakashan, one of India's leading publishing houses, with over 5,000 publications to their credit. I am grateful to my dear friend and Vice Chairman of the Gandhi Smriti and Gandhi Darshan, Shri Vijay Goyalji, for, allowing us, in fact, giving us the permission to organize this function, event, in this beautiful hall at the historic Gandhi Smriti, a national monument of global significance. I will also take this opportunity to thank Indian ambassadors present here, with whom I had the privilege of working closely during my 7-year stint in London and 6 years stint in the PMO. And I will be failing in my duty if I don't acknowledge and thank my very dear friend, Mr. Ambassador P.S. Raghavan, for his support in this venture. He has written the foreword of my book. I am grateful to him. And my thanks are also due to my friends present here. And I mean all my friends from the media, from the Delhi University days, and some of my schoolmates as well. Last but not the least, I thank my family members, especially my wife Sushma Tandon, who have been a source of strength to me all through. But before I take my seat, let me salute my 98 years old father-in-law, Shri R.R. Chopra, who has specially come to bless me all the way. Now, before I hand you over, Indrani, let me give you a brief introduction of you as well. Indrani has been a veteran journalist. She has worked with so many newspapers, a diplomatic editor with Times of India, and she has worked with India Today, Statesman, Economic Times. But recently when I came to know that Indrani is now CEO of Ananta Center, that was really a great news to me. Ananta Center is Pandit Ravi Shankar's, what should I call it, center? Or how do you describe the think tank? But CEO of the think tank, and therefore I am really grateful to her for accepting our invitation to moderate this session. And then a brief introduction of Ambassador Dogra as well. Ambassador Dogra was in London when I was posted in London as a journalist, and he has been, many of us must have seen him on television discussions. He has been very active on TV debates on foreign policy, and he has been ambassador to so many countries, particularly if I may mention, he has been ambassador to Romania and our consul general in Karachi, ambassador in Italy, and he has authored 7 books, and all, really best-selling books. And if I may name a couple of books which he has authored, Where Borders Bleed, Durand's Curse, India's Word and Wartime. And in fact, one of his books received the VOW award for best book, and that was Durand's Curse. I think all of us will appreciate that. And now I hand it over to you, Indrani. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for being here today. I think this is it's a great opportunity to both celebrate the book by Ashok Tandon ji, who I do not know him for as long as Hardeep does, certainly, but he was really kind to me as Prime Minister's media advisor, as a young reporter. And I first came to Delhi, and he was extremely kind to me when he was in the PMO. And but it's also a celebration of a very unique relationship. And one of the key aspects of the book is how it captures little vignettes of that relationship in a very unique and a very personal way. I will begin by asking Mr. Tandon to make a few opening remarks, following which I will ask Ambassador Dogra to do the same before getting into a Q&A session. Would you like to begin?
Thank you, Indrani. In fact, now since the book is in your hand, you can all glance through it. But at the very outset, I would like to say, and in fact, some of my friends were inquiring during the tea session, what motivated me to write this kind of a book. See, as we all know, I was in London. See, if you enter the Palace of Westminster, on the right-hand side, there is a huge painting. And that painting, when I saw for the first time, I stood there for a couple of minutes. Now, that painting is an ambassador of the King of Britain, presenting his credentials in the court of Emperor Jahangir. And that was the beginning of the arrival of the British to India, initially for trade. In fact, he was applying to initiate trade with India. And rest we all know is history. Now, I was wondering why the British have given such a pride of place to this painting. And then when I learned that this was installed when there was a campaign making of Britain, and that was the beginning of making of British Empire. So I thought, what was the lesson for we Indians? So that was one, incident that motivated me to look into the history. And then when I was doing research, then I come to the first chapter on Gandhi, which my friend Hardeep Puri has also mentioned. See, the secret cabinet notes of the wartime, what Churchill used to talk about Gandhi. And this book will give you all the details. So, the kind of language Churchill used to use, but this book will contain some of the references which were even off the record during that meeting, and the note taker, he took those off the record notes also and gave it to a British historian. So I have quoted this from a British historian's book, and I think that will also interest most of our readers. So then, like that, then I think the very next chapter is Jallianwala Bagh.
Yes.
So Jallianwala Bagh remains relevant even today. But one thing I would personally like to, in fact, request Ambassador Dogra to throw light on it, that why Britishers have not officially apologized for that. Because apology has been demanded, I think, for the last 100 years, more than 100 years. And in fact, when there was a function, event in the House of Westminster on the occasion of 100 years of Jallianwala Bagh, the demand for apology was raised. In fact, one of the British ministers said, I will straight away go to Downing Street and request, why are we not apologizing? So, with your permission,
Yes, of course.
Ambassador Dogra, is it to do something that in the British system, when you apologize for some crime, there is a provision for compensation? Are they afraid that the victim, their descendants who are still organizing events at Jallianwala Bagh till today, is it because of that the Britishers are not tendering apology? They have used all sorts of adjectives. In fact, the Queen, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Prime Minister, they have all regretted but not apologized officially, formally. So with these opening remarks, I should...
No,
Okay.
Ambassador Dogra, there is a leading question for you.
Well, before I come to that, let me say that I wanted to start by saying that I have read your book cover to cover. But as usual, Honorable Minister has beaten me to that. Because despite all the charges that he has and all the travels he does, I was really surprised that he found time to go into the details, because otherwise he couldn't have spoken with, I mean, he speaks with authority always, but he couldn't have spoken in detail as he did. So you are a hard act to follow.
I'm your friend and batchmate. That's what it comes.
So, and it's a very distinguished gathering, so thank you so much for letting me hold forth for as long as the two of us wish, because you are our captive. No, really, coming to this issue of why no apology for Jallianwala Bagh, my first reaction is, where do they start and where do they end? Do they apologize for the 3 million people in Bengal who famished and died because Churchill had decided that wheat supply or rice supply or food supply in 1941 needed to be sent to Greece for his soldiers who did not need them, need any of it. In fact, it rotted there. Rather than to keep it in Bengal for the people there. So, do they apologize for that? Do they apologize for a much graver crime of 1857? You know, there the acts by British soldiers were so gruesome that it makes it very hard to read even now. There were examples of soldiers putting 2 or 3 Indian soldiers or mutineers on the barrel of a gun, field gun, and then firing that field gun. And they delighted in the fact that the skull went one there, somewhere, blood was splattered elsewhere. So, do they apologize for that? So, besides this compensation, which they never are going to give for either this or many other crimes, the fact is that more than the formal apology, they feel that they're starting from Clive onwards, had committed so many acts of what can be called crimes that it is best to let the past be forgotten, as Cameron had said.
Thank you, Ambassador Dogra. Ashok ji, in your book, and you talked about the blue plaques, and the minister did too. But there is no, and I remember when you walk around London, you do come upon these little blue plaques, which are actually quite interesting. But as you said, there is no blue plaque for Netaji. So why do you suppose that is?
No, when I was doing research, I might have missed many luminaries who stayed in London, and there are no blue plaque. But I was curious to know, because Netaji did visit London. He appeared in the ICS. From there, and he one of the toppers, which he left again to become a freedom fighter. But why there was no blue plaque at the residence where Netaji stayed? So one curious question which came to my mind was it because he was a war criminal as far as the Allied powers were concerned? And that may be one of the reasons. But I have not been able to find an answer. I'm not sure whether Ambassador Dogra may be able to throw some light on it. But at least I could not come across, because they have put a plaque for Swami Vivekananda, Ambedkar, Savarkar, Lokmanya Tilak, Aurobindo, Rabindranath Tagore, of course Gandhi, Nehru, and many others. But why there no plaque for Netaji? So I was in fact, that's why I have not deliberately mentioned that there is no plaque, because I could not locate that during my research. Could this be one of the reasons, Ambassador Dogra? Because he was, in the eyes of the Allied powers, a war criminal? Could that be a reason?
You don't need to go that far. The fact is that Netaji's association with the UK was when he came to
Yes.
the ICS exam.
That's
Where he located his political freedom fight process that was located out of Germany, and therefore he didn't occupy the space at that point of time in the blue-black Valas in London. I think there's a simple explanation. I also asked this question when I was posted in London, because I think that's more likely the explanation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ambassador, you have.
No, just to add to what both of you have said, that one reason could be that there is a rule in England that if there is a blue plaque already existing on a house, then a second cannot be put there.
No, sorry. There are two blue flags for Mahatma Gandhi because he visited London twice and stayed at two different places.
But in two different houses.
There are two blue flags for Mahatma Gandhi. So I think that
Different houses.
In one house.
stayed at different houses.
So blue plaque in different houses is fine.
Okay, same
But
place.
same place,
sorry.
if they have for Mr. X, then Mr. Y cannot be placed there. The second one on the rebellion or whatever, Savarkar was charged of rebellion in 1909 against Minto Mowley award or rule by which Muslims were given a separate representation, and he was given a sentence of 50 years. Still, there's a blue plaque there. So I don't think that particular issue is important here. But what the minister has said may be the clue to why it has not happened.
Moving on, and you've also spoken about the repatriation of Indian statues, treasures, and you've spoken about the repatriation of treasures, of statues from different parts of the world, actually. Many from the US, Australia, certainly some from the UK. But would you like to talk a little bit more about what you've written about the idol being a juristic entity and the implications of that?
Yes, if you all look at the back page, there is among the 5 quotations, there is one about the repatriation of the precious Nataraja idol. And what surprised me was that the British High Court and the Britishers, if I'm not wrong, they don't believe in idol worship or even deity. But the High Court, while agreeing or allowing repatriation of the Nataraja idol, which at that time was about 2.3 crore, the High Court accepted the plea of the Indian advocates that once a deity, always a deity. An idol remains a juristic person, however long buried or damaged, since the deity and its juristic entity survive the total destruction of its earthly form. Now, this was something very surprising, that a British High Court, allowing repatriation of the Nataraja idol, accepted this plea and agreed. So I think there is a full chapter on not only this, how the idol reached London or other places, and many other precious artifacts, the treasures also. So I think it will be a very interesting reading. But I think people who are from the legal profession, like my friend Ryan Karanjawala, if he wants to say something, because this is something very unique as far as the Indian judicial system is concerned. The British High Court recognizing it, the idol, as a juristic person. Thank you. Our High Court. Lahore High Court. No, but Indian. Agreed. Okay, but an Indian or United Indian High Court, one can understand, but a British High Court saying it, that's why I have highlighted it on the back page. Thank you.
But maybe there was a precedent, maybe because we follow the same rules of jurisprudence, right?
I'm not sure. Only the legal luminaries can throw light on it, whether the same rule can be applied as far as India is concerned. So I've not gone into that.
Ambassador Dogra, something that is there in the book, which I thought was interesting. I mean, we've done lots of stories on, and there has been much writing on the return of the Kohinoor, and every so often somebody stands up and says, please return the Kohinoor. Do not put it on. And I think everybody looked at watched the coronation of King Charles III to see whether Queen Camilla would wear the Kohinoor on her crown, and she didn't. But the question is, the chapter that Mr. Tandon has an interesting bit about an Oriya claim, and a claim from Orissa. What do you make of that?
Well, Mr. Tandon left it at that.
Yes.
He didn't give any judgment like the High Court had given. But generally, on the issue of return of either artifacts or treasures or Kohinoor, British are in a peculiar frame of mind, and that frame of mind tells them that don't return any treasures, be they the economic offenders or statues or otherwise stolen things. I think one of the things is that if they start this process, then what are they going to be left with? Because whether private houses or the British establishment, whatever they have are stolen from the colonies, and including from their allies like Greece. So I think it's going to be a tough one. Maybe at some point or the other, if some of the sympathetic prime ministers take a different view, we might get something like a Kohinoor as one act of friendship.
Except, yeah,
So let me-
there's a difference between the two, between the Kohinoor
Indranee,
and the...
with your permission, let me add. What I have taken note of the Oriya historian's observation is, and he has claimed that Kohinoor was presented by Maharaja Ranjit Singh to Jagannath Puri temple after his victory of, I think, somewhere in
Lahore.
in Lahore. But before Kohinoor could be delivered to Jagannath Puri, Maharaja Ranjit Singh died. So that is one aspect which I have also highlighted in the book.
Yes.
Thank you.
Which of course gives a completely different, very interesting twist to the whole Kohinoor story. And there is, and you've also referred to this even in your account with Switzerland, on Switzerland, where because Dilip Singh had to give or did give, we don't know whether he was coerced, whether he gave it of his own volition, but the fact is that he was also there in Switzerland, and then that led to a completely different account of that, especially on the bank account of Princess Hilda. Yes. Would you like to talk about that?
No, it is significant because Maharaja Ranjit Singh's son Dilip Singh was taken to London by Britishers, and what happened is history. But while doing research, I came to know that Dilip Singh's daughter, Princess Catherine Hilda Dilip Singh, she had a bank account in one of the Swiss banks and also a safe deposit vault, which was last opened in 1939, and since then nobody has even known. But what happened to that? What exactly was there? So when the government of India is tracing unaccounted money, black money, I think the government of India can try what exactly lies in that bank account and also in the safe deposit vault. After all, Maharaja Ranjit Singh's granddaughter having so much of treasure, if it's still lying in Swiss bank, then I think India should take it up. That was the point I was taking.
The chapter, of course, that is most interesting for all journalists, because we like gossip. is from the reminiscences from your personal diary. You've got a bunch of stories, but there is one story which is interesting, and I'm wondering with Ambassador Dogra would like to weigh in on this as well, which is this is a story about Kuldeep Nair, he was a High Commissioner to the UK, which was a short term. But you mentioned very tantalizingly that he wanted to become High Commissioner to Pakistan, but didn't follow that. Why did he not become?
Well, if you all promise that this part follows the Chatham House rules, that means doesn't travel out of this room. One of the reasons was, when I was in Karachi, then there were a lot of these meetings of candlewalas. People used to go with candles from our side to the border, and similarly their counterparts from Pakistan would come to their side of the border and hope that through this process maybe the light would spread and there would be peace and amity, friendship and so on. So in one particular case, a delegation from India, including Mr. Kuldeep Nair, went to Lahore. When they reached the Lahore airport, the first act of Mr. Nair and others was to touch the Lahore committee and say कि अब तो बात ही अलग है. So one of the Pakistani participants, I won't take her name, very eminent participant, when she came back to Karachi and we were meeting at a dinner, so I said, तो अच्छा तो आप आई हैं, कल ही आई हैं? कहती हाँ. तो मैंने कहा लगता तो है कि सब कुछ ठीक होने वाला है. तो देखिए मिट्टी को भी उन्होंने हाथ लगाया सबसे पहले. तो कहती जब ये लोग मिट्टी में मिल जाएंगे तब शायद ठीक हो सकता है. That was not a reflection on one particular person, but a statement of a very pragmatic Pakistani woman who said it's not sentiments that are going to drive Indo-Pak amity, but some practical reasons. And if you're looking at something away from practical and pragmatic, then Mr. Nair did not fit with them. And that was the reason why Mr. Gujral finally was prevailed upon, that, someone else should be sent.
It's interesting that you spoke about somebody being more pragmatic and not sentimental in Pakistan, because in '99 when Mr. Vajpayee went on that bus ride and we were on the other side, I think the only the incident that struck almost all Pakistanis was his Mr. Vajpayee's remarks at the Minar-e-Pakistan, and I think it was for all of us who were reporting then, the one thing that they came and said to us over and over again was, this is the first Indian leader who said that Pakistan should be a separate sovereign entity, that you have given up, basically saying that you've given up hopes of annexing Pakistan. Do you remember that visit?
Yeah, what Vajpayee wrote in the logbook was that we do accept the existence of Pakistan. Of course, after we left, some radical elements in Pakistan, they washed that Minar and all that.
Yes.
But in fact, what we used to discuss in the PMO was that Pakistan over the last so many decades have not in fact conceded or realized that India actually is not going to destabilize Pakistan. So if you go into the history, during Nehru's time also, they used to say no, India is going to attack and get Pakistan back. So the best way to assure people of Pakistan was to write in the logbook that we do accept the existence of Pakistan. That was exact words of what Vajpayee wrote in the logbook. Thank you.
Right. And did you also have another very interesting bit about the handover between Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee, with that little chit about asking him to continue what Narasimha Rao couldn't, which was the nuclear tests. And while Mr. Vajpayee could not do it in the 96 tenure, in 98, that was the first thing he did. Do you remember how it went? Do you remember how that entire sequence happened?
No, frankly speaking, no, nobody, I think barring perhaps Principal Secretary Brajesh Mishra, nobody else knew what is going to happen. Mr. Raghavan was in the PMO, and in fact it was right to keep it secret. But one anecdote which I can share with you is that when we called a press conference where the Prime Minister was going to announce the nuclear test, and some of journalists, we were all standing behind the entire media crowd, and we were all chatting. So after everything was over, so Atal ji asked me, "ये आप लोग पीछे क्या बात कर रहे थे?" तो इस्माइल ऐसे, नहीं बताइए क्या बात कर रहे थे। तो मैं कहा सर बाहर पीछे गॉसिप ये हो रही थी कि कहीं आप त्याग पत्र तो नहीं देने जा रहे हैं। ये सर हम ऐसे ही छोड़ कर जाने वालों में से नहीं हैं। So that was one incident. Otherwise it was utmost secret. But what I think I would like my valuable readers to go through is in that chapter that a note, a classified note sent by the then US Ambassador Frank Wisner to Washington, which has now been declassified, and he openly writes in his note that US should not favor Vajpayee becoming a Prime Minister, because if he does, he will go for a nuclear test. And that particular thing is a genuine note. And I think that is why Narasimha Rao, in fact I have also written, Narasimha Rao had an inkling that US will not allow Vajpayee to become Prime Minister. So therefore he handed over the note. He said, what I could not accomplish, please do it, which he tried. But 96 government, we all know, fell in 13 days. So in 1998, when he came, first thing he ordered was a nuclear test. But the US had its apprehension. That's why sanctions were imposed on India. Thank you.
Rajiv, I wanted to bring you in because your memories of those days are just as rich as Mr. Tandon's. So would you like to share some of your memories of those days with us?
Well, all I'd say is that I was posted outside at that time, and the general reaction was one of being stunned. I mean, not me, but the reaction of foreigners and Japanese in particular. They won't even shake your hand for quite some time till Pakistan started its tit-for-tat tests and exceeded it by one. But I must say, my colleague Ambassador Raghavan is there, so he would know much more about it. But I must say, later on I gathered the kind of tense moments that people in South Block went through after the test, because they had to explain, pacify, and get on board countries which were angry, some of them very angry. And the notes I read of that time showed how remarkable people like Mr. Brajesh Mishra were, that they kept their cool and yet convinced those people, including Russia, that there was a reason to do it. And slowly the world came around. And thanks also to Pakistan for being reacting the way that they did. So the anger slowly diminished, but for those few days, it was a very tense period. And Mr. Vajpayee, of course, no amount of praise is less for him, but his team, led by Mr. Brajesh Mishra, did a remarkable job.
I would like to add one point that when US was trying to persuade Narasimha Rao not to go for nuclear test, US even asked Japan to use their influence on India. So, and Clinton himself spoke to Narasimha Rao, and Narasimha Rao had to agree, okay, we will abide by what you are saying. But then he had made all the preparations, so he wanted his successor, a close friend of Mr. Narasimha Rao, which Vajpayee was, and he did accomplish that.
Right, because I think it was 99 when Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh made his trip to Japan to try to bring them around. That was the first outreach after the nuclear tests. But that brings us to the end of this particular discussion. I think the book is vastly interesting. It's a nice read, easy read, but it's also an interesting read because it has little bits that you will not find anywhere else, but it only takes many years of personal experience to put that together. Thank you, Mr. Tandon, and thank you, Ambassador Dogra, for the discussion today, and good evening to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
कार्यक्रम का ये अंतिम चरण है। आप सबके प्रति हार्दिक आभार कि आप लोग आए, और माननीय मंत्री जी का आभार कि वे रहे इस कार्यक्रम में और लोकार्पण के बाद भी रुके रहे। इस कार्यक्रम से एक विमर्श स्थापित होगा कि कैसे हम अपनी पुरानी चीज़ों को भारत ला सकें। तो इस विमर्श के लिए आदरणीय इंद्रानी जी और एम्बेसडर राजीव डोगरा जी का विशेष आभार, अशोक जी का आभार कि इस पुस्तक को प्रकाशन के लिए हमें दिया।